Welcome, everybody. Good evening. How are you all today? How are you all today, wherever you are? I hope you are doing well. Um, like the stream, of course, like the stream. Hit that like button. Hit that like button for this video. Make sure you're boosting it and sharing it. Might be a slower night tonight, but nonetheless, please do share it, like the video. That's how you boost the algorithm. So I'm going to be streaming tonight and tomorrow. I'm going to try to get done at 10 p.m. sharp today. I definitely have to get done a little earlier today. And then tomorrow, I will be having a really great guest. So at the end, I'll make that public. I'll make sure you know where you can hit the notifications, all of that. Make sure that you're all there tomorrow. I will have Jerry Gray on, who is a cyclist. He is a former Australian diplomat. I believe he worked in the security forces, actually, but has since been very outspoken about China and especially Xinjiang. He's been there plenty of times. And I'm excited to have him on. Um, Actually, he's from Canada. He's from Canada originally. So it's going to be fun. So tomorrow I will have Jerry Gray on, who's been very outspoken about Xinjiang, is a Westerner who lives out in China, and he is going to talk about Xinjiang with me. And I know that you all have been wanting that kind of stream. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow. So tomorrow evening, I'll be sure to share that information at the end of this video, at the end of this stream. So stick around, hit the like button, share it. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notifications bell so you know when to come on. And then if you're able to, please do subscribe. I'm about 5 subscribers away on Patreon from 500. So that's my goal before the end of this month. Please do subscribe in the link in the description. Also, Substack. I definitely want to plug my Substack. You can do annual memberships. I want to say that is a good option, and that those definitely count. And I do publish on there as well. I publish my articles on there. I also make sure people are notified about streams, so you can support on Substack as well. So, yes, it's Monday evening. Is it Monday evening? No, it's Thursday evening. I'm getting my days all crossed. It's Thursday evening. We have a lot to get to, so we can get started after. I'm just going to say hello to people in the chat. Hello, Red. How are you? This is the green room. I saw that you were quite active in the chat before, well before we went live. So welcome, Red. Hi, got milk. Thank you for that comment. Tian Wong, hello, hello, hello. Good to be with you. Hello, Ventos. We are going. What's up, Big Teal? Good to see you back here. And then Loa Socialisti. Welcome back. And Patamilo, yes, hello, hello. We got Punisher 246 back in the house. Hello, Holly. I know you can't stay. That is perfectly fine. Be sure to catch the replay and share it, of course, if you're able. How do I sound, everyone? Quick sound check. Yeah, I'm a little tired. I gotta say, my sleep schedule is all messed up of late. But keep sharing this, keep liking it. Hopefully, we can get more folks in here. Hello, Shamarke. Shamarke. I don't want to mispronounce that, but hello to you. John, to Emily. Good to see you, and good to see you, Tish. All right. So today I have 2 things I want to talk about. One of which hopefully will go a little faster, just an update on what China is doing, what China just announced, and how they are handling this Pelosi situation. I'm going to play a quick clip from Nancy Pelosi as well. It was on the Wall Street Journal talking about Somaliland. The U.S., of course, is at war in Somalia, has been since arguably the 90s, and trying to use Somaliland as a chip. It's Somalia, using a region in Somalia as a chip, trying to do kind of a similar thing, break it off from Somalia, turn Somalia into a very divided state as it is already, but really just to create more fertile political ground, using China as an excuse to do that, fertile political ground for further militarization and just all sorts of heinous crimes the U.S. has committed there. As you may well know, earlier this summer, right before the summer started, Joe Biden sent troops back to Somalia, hundreds of them, in order to further this war there. And in an article, Wall Street Journal shared a part of Pelosi's press conference that I thought was important from today, where she talked about responding to critics regarding her Taiwan visit. So I'll play that briefly. There's also a New York Times article responding, and I'll just read a portion of that. I'm not going to give them the airplay that they got in prior streams, but I'll read a little bit of that so you get a little bit of a taste how the New York Times is trying to spin China's response overall, and their most recent one, which I'm going to talk about right now. So thank you so much, Big Teo, for plugging. Thanks to all the moderators. I could make more moderators at some other time. I think I'm just going to stick to those who are there already. So thank you. So first, China did the drills, the military exercises from August 4th, and they subsided August 7th. So about 3 days, surrounded Taiwan, broke the so-called ADIZ with the median line, crossed the strait, and showed that they could really militarily respond very rapidly and deploy major forces in the air and the sea to stop any kind of military intervention, any kind of provocation by the separatists and backed by the United States, of course. So that was seen as almost like a one-off. And I think that a lot of the Western press, the corporate media, the U.S. foreign policy establishment hoped that this would end, that this would be it, that there wouldn't be a consistent military response from China, because that would be kind of a disaster. China's, how should I say, willingness to stand up for itself is not a good example, right? It's something that creates a lot of problems and places, as China has said, places pressure on the U.S. side to correct itself, make mistakes, errors that it doesn't want to make. It doesn't have the capacity to handle, especially in a very sensitive political moment, any kind of major transition in U.S.-China relations. So really playing with fire as Xi Jinping, as China's foreign ministry, as everyone within China's political system has been saying about this. But China is not stopping. China is actually they announced today that they will continue to carry out military exercises around Taiwan. And here is what the PLA had to say. This is from China Daily. And they announced today that the People's Liberation Army is to regularly patrol the Taiwan region. And this is bad news for the United States. And there's a reason why this is bad news. The big reason is that actually this is a deterrent. And they're going to say this here, and I believe it. To place, right, this is the first time that China has been willing to place its military hardware in the very same area that the United States has been so keen on militarizing. So it does put both the United States' military, its Navy, in a kind of bind, right? They don't want, as much as there's all this political bluster, this moment, at this time, there isn't sufficient political capital. There isn't really the United States is a lot weaker than it looks, maybe, or than it perceives itself to be, right? It is much weaker than I think a lot of people may think. A lot of China's detractors, a lot of China hawks kind of play up that the U.S. is in this incredible position. I don't know if you saw Josh Rogan, the neocon hack, who's a regular on Breaking Points. He made a headline that said, no, the United States can wage war on Russia and China together. And then in the article said nothing of the U.S.'s actual capacity to do so, because there is no argument here. The United States is not in an economic, political, or military position to take a confrontational approach in a manner that China's military exercises. It's China's waters, it's China's airspace, it's China's territory. The China's willingness to stand up for itself poses problems, and so the People's Liberation Army, the People's Liberation Army said this, okay, and this is through the China Daily, where it was reported. It says the Eastern Theater Command of the PLA, People's Liberation Army, will organize regular combat patrols in the Taiwan region and resolutely safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity after successfully completing its recent training exercises around Taiwan. Senior Colonel Shi Yi, a spokesperson for the theater command, said in a statement on Wednesday. The recent military drills in the seas and airspace around Taiwan have achieved their mission and objectives and effectively tested the theater's command joint combat capability, he said. The theater command will keep a close eye on the situation in the Taiwan Straits and continue its military training and war preparation efforts, he added. At the same time, it will recognize regular quote-unquote combat readiness patrols in the region, she said. The PLA has conducted a series of live fire exercises this month in the wake of Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House's visit to the island on August 2nd. Over the past week, dozens of ballistic missiles and long-range rockets were fired at targets around Taiwan, while more than 100 aircraft and 10 destroyers and frigates participated in the exercises. Some of the PLA's military hardware, such as the J-20 stealth fighter jet and the DF-17 hypersonic ballistic missile, saw action in the recent exercises. Analysts said the exercises had essentially encircled the island, and I've been talking about this, given their unprecedented intensity and scale. The Ministry of National Defense said in a statement on Wednesday that the PLA's exercises around Taiwan serve as a powerful deterrence to separatist forces in Taiwan and foreign interference. They are justified and necessary actions to protect national sovereignty and territorial integrity, said Senior Colonel Tan Kei-fi, a ministry spokesman. Tan said exercises were open, transparent, and professional and were conducted in accordance with domestic and international laws and practices. Pelosi's visit to the island blatantly challenged and undermined China's core interests and severely damaged peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits, he said. The island's Democratic Progressive Party, which is the ruling party in Taiwan, has pursued its separatist agenda of colluding with foreign powers, disregarded the safety of Taiwan people, and pushed Taiwan into a chasm of calamity. It will be pinned to history's wall of shame, he said. Tan said the process of reunification is unstoppable. The momentum and opportunity for solving the Taiwan question have always been in the hands of those that support national reunification. For the well-being of the Taiwan people, we are willing to exercise utmost sincerity in efforts to pursue the prospect of peaceful reunification. But the PLA will leave no room for Taiwan separatist forces and foreign powers to achieve their goals. Here's a good sentence. Now, cross-straits relations are once again at a crossroads, and Taiwan authorities must make the right choice. So there you have it. That's the PLA's position. The exercises are going to continue. There are going to be regular patrols around Taiwan. It's not a one-off. And today, at the same time that the PLA announced this, also, I'm not going to read the whole announcement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but they released a white paper today. This is from the State Council, actually, not the Ministry of Foreign, but the State Council, which the Ministry of Foreign Affairs falls under, of the People's Republic of China, released a white paper on the question of reunification in this new era. So China's government is talking about this already. This is a very swift kind of response. They're showing that this is going to be on the table. And with the CPC Congress that's coming up, the CPC National Congress that's coming up later in the fall, that's going to be a big topic of conversation as well. So I said this with Brett at Revolutionary Left Radio. I said, this is going to be an ongoing conversation and all options are on the table. And certainly any provocation from both the DPP separatists and the United States' military is going to garner even stronger responses from here on out. That's just a fact. There's no denying that. So the white paper released reiterated the fact that Taiwan is part of China, demonstrated the resolve of the Communist Party of China and the Chinese people, as well as their commitment to national reunification, and emphasized the position and policies of the CPC and the Chinese government in the new era. It also goes over history. I read some of it. Goes over the history of Taiwan. It talks about, the international law, the principles, and that we are one China. That's China's position. And the realization of complete national reunification is driven by the history and culture of the Chinese nation and determined by the momentum towards circumstances surrounding our national rejuvenation. So it's part of a larger goal that Taiwan reunification is not a question of if, but when. And China is being very firm about that. And it talks about the external forces at play and how peaceful reunification is the most beneficial option. That's what China will pursue. But we will leave no room for separatist activities in any form. That's really the big message here. No room for separatism. There's no room for Taiwan independence, no room for the DPP, really, the party that says it's ruling over the island. No room for them if their position is separatism. So that's a red line. That's the line in the sand. China has drawn that line, and actions from here on out are going to reflect this. And so these military patrols are big. They are a deterrence. It should not be underestimated that the United States' military, as Colonel Douglas McGregor said on Tucker Carlson's program, I caught that, as others have said, the Rand Corporation, it's not going to end well for the United States if they provoke a military confrontation with China. If they pursue that in any way over Taiwan, it won't end well. And China's actions from here on out are to demonstrate that that will be the case and that China is not relenting, will not be afraid. It's not going to the CPC, the Chinese government, the Chinese people. They're not scared. I wrote in my article for Black Agenda Report this week, I said China knows what it's like to be under the gun of U.S. aggression. This is not the first time. This has been happening first, the decades worth of the pivot to Asia, the build up to this. But then history, China lost more than 100,000, I think it was 200,000 volunteers in their aid to Korea in the U.S. war of aggression there. 200,000 people in that 3-year period alone. And the United States was responsible for essentially all of that, whether it was through backing the puppet regime in the South or literally bombing the North to the point where 70+% of all infrastructure, right? And infrastructure was backward at that time. It was a colonial period. We were talking about a colonial underdeveloped period. 70% of all infrastructure was gone. More than a third of the population was entirely homeless without anywhere to live. That's what the United States did. And so China understands the aggression. And then the Taiwan Straits crises, 2 of them in the 1950s, threats of nuclear war, tens of thousands of U.S. troops in Taiwan. This isn't necessarily new. We think of the old Cold War as some kind of relic of the past, but the new Cold War shows us it is not a relic of the past, and that past is actually present, that there is a continuity here that is being played out, and that the United States is making a farce out of normalization, and that is dangerous. Any time where the United States is attempting to sever all ties with another country is an act of preparation for war. That's what the United States is doing. Now, of course, Nancy Pelosi doesn't think so. She doesn't think so. She doesn't even say the one China principle. She hasn't, I don't even know if she's really said it. She might have said it once or twice, but it was always kind of flippantly. In most of her statements since this time and during this time of her ridiculous, reckless trip, she won't say it. Hardly any of these Biden foreign policy establishment figures and officials will say one China. They won't say it. And that is very telling. And as I said before, China knows what this is like. China lost 3 journalists in Belgrade when the United States, through NATO, bombed the Chinese embassy there. It was a mistake. And in 2001, they killed a Chinese pilot when they were flying over Hainan Island. I just learned about that. I was looking up this history of U.S. aggression toward China, and that popped up, right? That was in 2001 during the U.S.'s buildup of the war on terror. Suddenly, U.S.-China relations under George W. Bush reached an incredibly sensitive moment when a U.S. fighter jet literally entered airspace and China took it. China took that fighter jet. And so there was a collision, actually. There was a collision between the two. The Chinese pilot died, but China took the US pilot and landed it. So this isn't new. And Nancy Pelosi is taking from this legacy and trying to make it her own in a much more, way more than 2001, way more than 2006 during the so-called or 1996 during the third Taiwan Straits crisis. We're talking about a very sensitive moment in U.S.-China relations, and Nancy Pelosi is pouring gasoline onto a fire. That's what she's doing. So let me play you the clip of hers, okay? I want to show you what she had to say here because I think it's very telling. And I would talk more about Somaliland and the comparison between Taiwan. I would do that if I had the time. So that's for another time. I just want to play you this video from this article because, of course, right now, what the corporate media is doing is they're trying to frame China as isolating itself. Somaliland is making China fume. First of all, Somaliland is in Somalia. It's not technically quote unquote independent, although the United States is doing everything it can covertly to spur that. The United States has sent troops there. It is trying to base the fight against so-called Al-Shabaab there. It's really close to Djibouti. It borders Djibouti, which is a country that China has deep relationships with. The China-Africa relations are probably strongest, or some of the strongest China-Africa relationships exist in the Horn, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti. And the United States desperately wants to break that up and is using Somalia as part of that. So the corporate media is talking all about how China is isolating itself. And the New York Times has done this too, and I'm going to get to that. But let's play. I want you to listen to what Nancy Pelosi had to say. It's actually absolutely ridiculous. It's really hard to understand her. But let's listen to her.
Support this and going to Taiwan was to say that we have this strong relationship built on the status quo, which we support, which is really important because they're saying, well, we're trying to upset. No, the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, at the same time as our change of recognition, established the terms of our relationship, the 3 U.S. China joint communiques, and the 6 assurances. So there's no departure from that. But
there's no departure from that. And she cited first, this is political. She doesn't write her own speeches. That was written for her. She doesn't write her own. She's not coached on her own. She didn't come to that press conference without this in mind. She was told that she needs to say it like this. This is very dangerous to cite the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act first. If you don't know what that act is, it is not a document that stipulates the relationship. No, 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 no. That's not what it is. It didn't involve China. So it's not that says, oh, this is how we define our relationship with China. No. The Taiwan Relations Act is the way that the United States has contradicted its own terms with China through the Shanghai Communique of 72, and then of course the second communique in 1979, which was the normalization period. And basically it says that the United States can continue to pump arms. That's the biggest part of it. Pump arms into Taiwan, and that it has the right to keep Taiwan having strategic kind of like independence. That's where this strategic ambiguity comes from. The United States recognizes one China, but it also says that Taiwan has the ability to be independent and that it will keep informal relations and that arms sales are included in this. So Taiwan Relations Act is really about the U.S. military and the military-industrial complex having the ability to give arms to Taiwan's authority, to Taiwan's political authority. So to cite that first is really, I mean, it's a rhetorical violation of the One China Act because she didn't even say in the 1972 Shanghai Communique, which really is the first document that outlines the relationship. She just says the 3 joint communiques, and she doesn't say One China at all.
Keeping with that, we will not allow China to isolate Taiwan. They have kept Taiwan from participating in the World Health Organization, other things where Taiwan can make a very valued contribution. And they
So China is isolating itself. That's what she's saying. Because it's one China. That's the law. That's international law. That is the U.S. China bilateral law. Like if you take into account what it means to be normalized, these are rules that govern how you behave with each other. And so to say that China is isolating Taiwan is absolutely ridiculous. The one country two systems model is the loosest in Taiwan, by far the loosest, looser than Macau, looser than Hong Kong. There's no doubt that Taiwan enjoys more political autonomy out of any of its territories than Taiwan. And so what she's really saying here is that she's not going to let Taiwan be isolated as a country. Because who's representing the World Health Organization? Countries, right? It's not, we're not talking about whether Taiwan's organizations, whether informal organizations can contribute. No, talking about official representation. That's what she's talking about. And that's what she wants to prevent China from doing. I mean, this is war talk. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is scare. I mean, this should scare people that she's so flippantly willing to talk like this.
They may keep them from going there, but they're not keeping us from going to Taiwan. We will not allow them to. So we think their reaction, that was our purpose, to salute this thriving democracy. Don't take it from me.
She can't finish a sentence. She can't finish a sentence. She's not finishing her sentences here. What is she saying? She says, we're not going to let them not let us go there. We're not going to let them not let us go to Taiwan. That was our purpose. We're not, like she can't get the words out. Let's listen to that again because she can't seem to speak.
Democracy, don't take it from me. Freedom from going to Taiwan. We will not allow them to. So we think
we will not allow them to
their reaction, that was our purpose.
Their reaction was our purpose, right?
To salute this thriving democracy. Don't take it from me. Freedom House said, one of the freest.
Freedom House, that NED funded right-wing neocon institution. Don't take it from me. Take it from my neocon pals over at Freedom House.
The democracies in the world. Show our respect for that, for the success of their economy, for the enthusiasm of their young people to embrace democracy, and others as well, but the young knowing nothing else except a free Taiwan. So that was our purpose. Their pretext was our visit, for them to do what they normally do, intensified. They didn't do it when the Senate went under Chairman Menendez of the Foreign Relations Committee.
They didn't do it, right, guys? They didn't do it. Like, who is she turning around to? Are you confident? They didn't do it when the Senate Foreign Relations Committee went there. Oh, they didn't do it when Menendez and those guys did it. They didn't. It's just me. It's all about me. They have a problem just with me. It's like, no shit. They have a problem with you, Nancy Pelosi. You're the third in command. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee is not the third in command to the White House. They're not there. If Kamala Harris goes down, after Joe Biden goes down, if those two can't, if they can't go on, right, then it's you who's president, not the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Like, this is absolutely, I mean, this is how criminal Pelosi is, right? This is just how absolutely disingenuous, absolutely opportunistic she is. She's turning around. She's like, right? Like, don't you know that anything I say is just the right thing? And even if I'm going to start a war, you should just all be with me because of those youth who's for a free Taiwan. I'm not doing anything but supporting separatism and so-called freedom from China. Like, that's nothing, right? I mean, it's so criminal. I mean, she's a war criminal. She is a war criminal. So all of her support for past wars. And she's literally laying a path to one of the most destructive wars that humanity would ever have
Maybe
seen.
they just decided to do it this time.
They just decided to do it this time. China said, you know, Nancy Pelosi, you're so special. It's just all about you. It doesn't have to do with you being the House Majority Speaker. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that that Joe Biden's administration has said 3 times it's going to militarily intervene in Taiwan should we quote unquote invade and send all these millions upon millions, billions of weapons to Taiwan, reinforce Donald Trump's policy, militarize the South China Sea and the Asia Pacific even further, constantly talked about containing and isolating China, made a whole Indo-Pacific strategy about it, and then decided that it was okay for you when you said that you're gonna maybe or maybe perhaps I don't know I could end up in Taiwan. Go there and then take a military aircraft there, be backed up by the USS Ronald Reagan and all sorts of other military hardware, just to go to Taiwan and talk to the authority there as if that they're some kind of independent country. It's no big deal. It's just all about you, Nancy. You are that special. It's all about you. I mean, this is how narcissistic anyone who can say this as a political figure whose actions impact global relationships that impact the economic, political, and military situation in the world, to be able to say this, that it's just me, it's all me. It's unfair that China just always does what it does, escalate things, and is using me as an excuse. What an absolute pile of garbage. This is how absolutely trash bin US politics are right now. It's people like this who are adored by a large portion of the quote unquote electorate, really just those who are trapped in the two-party system. War criminals, corporate thieves, that's who govern the United States. And so I'm just going to pull up to end this segment how the New York Times reacted to China's announcement that um, China is going to do more drills, okay? And I'm going to just show you the title and go down to the part I want to read. And I'll tell you the argument before I go down all the way, because I'm not going to read this whole thing. The argument is so repetitive, I just can't read it. It says, as China vows more military exercises, Taiwan is undeterred. China's drills have hardened Taiwan's understated approach to navigating big power rivalry over its political future. So you see this language here? It's all propaganda. Taiwan is undeterred. Taiwan is so heroic. Taiwan's understated approach. Taiwan is so peaceful, right? They're putting out this image of China being the aggressor by using Taiwan as its pawn. So Taiwan is its pawn. It's this lily white democracy. It's like Western. It's neo colony. That's what the United States corporate media is trying to embed in us. It's like literally trying to colonize our minds. So let's go to the area I want to start at. Okay, it's right here. So the argument basically up until this point has been China's military drills backfired. They didn't work. People in Taiwan hate China even more now. The military drills did nothing. They showed nothing. They showed how weak they are. Here's our like pawns to tell you how weak they are from Taiwan. And that's basically the argument from here. And so this is, I think, really interesting from here on out. So again, it says, China's exercises have aroused such great criticism from the international community, i.e., the United States, Europe, those countries, NATO countries. For Taiwan, it would be impossible to reduce future engagement because of this. It will hope to strengthen its international participation further. So this is another hack, Mr. Fawn. So another one of their think tank hacks. But this is interesting. Even the political theater of Miss Pelosi's visit itself may serve as a model going forward. Taiwan has grown adept at courting senior lawmakers from major powers in what has been called, quote unquote, congressional diplomacy. So here we go. The strategy has allowed Taiwan to strengthen international exchanges without raising the specter of full diplomatic recognition in the ire of China that might come with the visit of a president or a prime minister. In July, Nicolo Beer, vice president of the European Parliament, visited the island in a recent parallel to Pelosi's trip that caused less controversy. China doesn't really recognize the European Parliament as a government, so of course it would cause less controversy. It's representative of more of a political alliance. It's not a government. Maybe after the election, the new Speaker of U.S. Congress will also visit Taiwan. See, hear this? The new Speaker, which would make it routine, said Mr. Fawn, the same guy. And that it might be possible that Ms. Pelosi might invite Miss Tsai to speak in front of U.S. Congress. You see what they're doing here? This is all about politics, guys. It's all about how to make Taiwan separatists feel empowered and China be more and more uh, 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 provoked. This is all provocation. It's all provocation. That attention could also add, here we go, further attention urgency to American arms sales to Taiwan. The Russian invasion of Ukraine had already convinced many in Washington and Taipei that a Chinese invasion was a possible danger and that a smaller military, if armed with the right weapons, could beat back a larger force. Bada bing, bada boom. That is it. That is it. That is what this is all about. This is all about the United States' military testing the waters. Taiwan's a pawn here. They're acting like Taiwan is an independent voice. Oh, no, 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 no. Taiwan is a neo colony. That's what they're trying to build it up to be. They're trying to strip it from China and make it into a neo colony. Because what can you do with neo colonies? You can get them to fight your wars for you. So a small island like Ukraine is a small country. You can mire it in a quagmire of war. You can embattle it in a quagmire of a war. You can destroy that country. You can destroy those people, right? Like what has happened in Ukraine. You can destroy that country by drawing Russia into a military operation, which has actually succeeded. This is the lesson that they're not learning. Russia's special military operation has succeeded in a lot of ways. China also would succeed probably more swiftly than even what Russia has been able to accomplish, just given the geopolitical realities. But this is what they're saying. More urgency to arms sales, more urgency for the military industrial complex to rake in more super profits. That's what this is all about. They're saying it without actually saying it. But if we actually have any kind of critical lens in this media sphere, in the Western media sphere, if we look at it without rose tinted glasses, if we take off the veil, if we stop thinking that everything that the corporate media says is truth, then we can get behind some of this. We can really unveil the truth about what's going on. Taiwan officials, nonetheless, have complained about delays and unfulfilled orders in part of overproduction constraints. Other systems Taiwan has wanted, including sophisticated naval helicopters, have been judged unnecessary by U.S. officials for fighting China with an asymmetric strategy that focuses on mobility and precision attacks. The delays and strategic disagreements could put Taiwan in a difficult position where a sudden conflict to break out. American officials have considered stockpiling arms in Taiwan out of concern that it might be tough to supply the island in the event of a Chinese military blockade. You see, the United States' military does understand the strategic limitations with Taiwan and the military industrial complex. They love that. They love that Taiwan is a weak pawn that has no national legitimacy. This is the thing. The U.S. ruling class is not stupid. The U.S. ruling class is not stupid. Now, certainly its class interests can make it do stupid things, but like this, but it is trying to outsmart its way through this. And of course, get all of the profits it can out of this. So, oh, yes, there's a strategic problem here. There is a disadvantage here. We can make money off of this. Let's stockpile. Let's pump Taiwan with arms. That's what's happened. Taiwan is crying about delays, and that's because there's a huge backlog. The U.S. military apparatus is so outstretched, it cannot keep up with the arms sales in Taiwan. They're not the hugest. They're not like these massive packages that are going to Ukraine. You know, they're not 40 billion in one setting, but it's over time, 5 billion here, 8 billion there. 36 billion, I think it's somewhat since the Obama administration. So we're talking about a pretty large sum, and a lot of that is backlogged, about probably more than half, but I think a little less than half officially. So they can't get it, but they're going to pump it, and that's going to lead to contracts. That's going to lead to profits for the military armaments. That's what this is all about. The arms sales process is one where Taiwan has to justify the need to the Americans on why we want those weapons, said Keech Lau, a military and cyber affairs consultant at Doublethink Lab, a Taiwanese research group. And there's nothing more powerful than empirical evidence of what's happening on the ground, so the drills would provide hard proof to back up future requests. Oh, yes, let's use the U.S.'s military provocations leading to China's military drills as further reason to get more arms. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. They're not willing to understand the limitations. Okay. We're talking about now Tsai Ing-wen, the so-called president of DPP, talking about lengthening military service, but they're struggling. These exercises are a deterrent. They're trying to say that China's actions have bolstered support for the military in Taiwan. They're making it sound like there's some kind of appetite for more provocation. But we will see through the actions of so-called President Tsai Ing-wen that these military drills are actually deterrent, and that the United States is trying to make a a David into a Goliath, right? They're trying to make uh, uh, they're trying to make Taiwan out to be much stronger than it really is. They're underestimating, they're pumping all sorts of propaganda to make us feel bad for it's this kind of strong victim, right? Ukraine was the same way. Look at the democracy. Look at the democracy. Look at the freedom. Look at the European elements to Ukraine. Support it, support it, support it against the Russia aggression, the horde, the Asiatic, right? This like absolutely disgusting authoritarian government. They're trying to do the same thing here while completely not giving any voice to the fact that there is no strategic advantage. But there's plenty of money to be made and plenty of profits to be made. And a war is the only possible direction to go if you want to continue to make those profits. So Taiwan is a pawn. And the New York Times shows there that they're going to keep Taiwan as a pawn and they're going to keep using it and they're going to play ping pong with that pawn. They're going to stop playing chess and they're going to just hit the same, they're just going to hit the same move over and over and over again. They're going to give that up and they're just going to whack Taiwan with weapons. They're going to tank the economy with the CHIPS Act. They're going to use Taiwan, weaken Taiwan while trying to bolster this independence claim. It's suicidal and it's absolutely going to backfire. But the United States empire has nowhere else to go. It's in a rut. It's in decline. And so here's what a declining imperialist empire looks like. This is what we have to be aware of, that we have to be vigilant about, and that we have to really harness that anger, that opposition to prior wars, right? From the 2003 invasion of Iraq to the war on Syria, now with the special military operation Ukraine losing popular support. We have to really have the same kind of anti-imperialist, anti-war mentality when it comes to China right now, because this is very serious. We have to build up our forces to be prepared for what could be the worst, because the U.S. government, the military state, they are preparing for the worst, meaning that they are ready to instigate the unthinkable, and they are not being quiet about repeating these actions, trying to poke China as if China hasn't said peace or reunification is number one priority, but separatism, independence of Taiwan is the red line, and there will be consequences. And those consequences will be borne out militarily if they try anything. It's as simple as that, really. And so, I mean, it's absolutely suicidal and ridiculous, but that's the update with what's going on with China right now. Things are escalating. They are. And China is rightfully standing up for its self-determination. So while I move on to the next story, guys, like the video, share the video. Let's see where this ratio is at. I need to go back to the channel. Like the video, share it. Make sure you hit the notifications bell, subscribe. Yeah, we're about 26 away. So if 26 of you, if you're watching, be sure to like the video. Boost this in the algorithm. That really helps. And be sure to share it, of course. And I'm 5 subscribers away from on Patreon for meeting my goal of 500 for the month. I'm definitely trying to keep this work sustainable. I know that things are really difficult right now, so I want to get through this next story because I do also want to do the Patreon question for you guys, because I do Patreon questions. I try to do one per stream. So, all right, look, with this story, I'm only going to talk about one element to it because I think that's what's the most important. All right. The most important element of this story is what the FBI is, because there's been a lot of debate and argument about the FBI's raid of Mar-a-Lago. The FBI's raid of Mar-a-Lago, yes, there's a lot of contradictions to it. And certainly people have been arguing. I saw Jimmy Dore, Nina Turner really arguing about this. My position is this: it is both true that the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, on Trump, is indeed nothing to support. The FBI is not an institution we should ever support. It's never on the side of the working class. It's never on the side of the oppressed. It's the opposite, and I'm going to show why. It's the opposite. It is also true that a lot of Trump supporters, we saw it all over social media, we've seen even protests of this, have jumped on the bandwagon of saying abolish the FBI. I mean, these are the same forces that when people said abolish the police, abolish prisons, they were calling for the police to stamp out peaceful protesters, right? So that is a contradiction that also needs to be called out. Like, yeah, you can say abolish the FBI, and certainly I'm not going to say no to that. But why is it that the police state, when it's going after leftists, when it's going after people who are fighting for demands like defund the police, like stop killing black people, why is it that it's only when things happen to Donald Trump that MAGA people get angry, right? But they're willing to spit the most racist red meat at forces that are fighting real tangible problems that affect more people than Donald Trump. I mean, that's a contradiction we have to talk about. Doesn't mean it's the principal one, though, because in my estimation, although I don't, Nina Turner's tweet to me was a big nothing burger. I thought that, when it comes to the squad and their politics, big nothing burger here. Like, I didn't see much of that as having much political significance. But I have seen over the course of the years, this is what is true, that the Democratic Party, I said this on Wilmer Leon's program today, The Critical Hour, I said that the Democratic Party has this political strategy, and that is creating a big tent of the entire foreign policy establishment, especially those aligned with the GOP. And that could be elements of the FBI, could be elements of the CIA, could be elements of all 15 other intelligence agencies, the military apparatus, the Pentagon, the entire, wherever, and then, of course, we get into the private sector, the corporations, the monopolies. That has been the strategy in the political forces. George W. Bush, for example, rehabilitated. Dick Cheney, rehabilitated, right? This is a strategy, a big tent strategy. Let the Democratic Party basically be the new Republican Party, and let the Republican Party be the Donald Trump Party. And that's the strategy. That is exactly what the Democrats have done. And that's why the Democratic Party has been so criticized for its love for the FBI when it goes after Donald Trump. Or similarly, right, you had Democrats when Jeff Sessions, when he was ousted, right, in Trump's as Trump's attorney general. What happened? There were protests of this racist Confederate, right? This guy who wants to lynch black people in prisons. I mean, this guy is really abhorrent, but you had liberals protesting that. So that's a development we also have to talk about, probably even more so than what these MAGA types are doing, because we should know by now what MAGA types are doing. So in my opinion, I think that this FBI raid, it's part of more political theater about Donald Trump. It's trying to raise our concern about Donald Trump leading into midterms. I think a lot of it's political. I don't think there's much substance behind it. But we also have to look at how those in the opposition, right? We have to look at, well, how do we talk about the FBI now? Do we just say, oh, yeah, because Marjorie Taylor Greene said abolish the FBI, we're all for abolish the FBI? I think it's more complicated. Leftists have to have an independent position. We just don't repeat whatever people in the GOP figures forced in the GOP who are trying to flank in certain places to gain political capital. We just don't go along with that. We're not going to say Marjorie Taylor Greene is wrong. The FBI shouldn't be abolished. Politics is much more sophisticated than that, right? We should be talking about what is the role of the FBI? Why should we abolish the FBI? Why is it that the United States' military intelligence state is so funded, well funded, so well endowed, and also so brutal and aggressive? Why is it so warmongering? Why does it wage wars at home and abroad? What is its role? These are the questions that politics should be the subject of, right? And so I want to show you just, I was going to show you a little bit about what CNN said about it, just so you have some context. And then I want to read, it's Black August, everyone. And so for the last 30 minutes or so, for 15 minutes, I'm going to try to read through Huey P. Newton's War of Repression against the Black Panther Party, his dissertation. It goes over the history of the FBI and exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. And that's the basis of our opposition to the FBI. And that's our basis for saying whoever defends the FBI, Democrat or Republican, is an enemy. Whoever defends the U.S. military state is an enemy. And of course, when people do that, anyone does that, we should challenge them. That's the position. And we just have to be clear on whether that's happening or not. We have to be clear about that. So I'm just going to pull this up real quick. So this is from CNN. And they're talking about how the FBI is not unsealing the warrant and that the silence has allowed Donald Trump's forces to get out in front. So on Monday, Trump's Mar-a-Lago property, there was a search by the FBI. Agents appeared around 10 a.m. Eastern time in plainclothes, not in the early morning hours, and wearing FBI logo jackets commonly seen in searches. Trump was in New York at the time. And so all of this has to do with a criminal probe about whether Trump had mishandled classified information. That's what this is supposedly about. It's very political. At the same time that they're receiving questions about how this happened, the DOJ then released this probe into whether John Bolton was going to be assassinated by Iranian assassins, right? I mean, this is how ridiculous this is getting. It's politics. I mean, this is politics, guys. This is how the state is trying to bamboozle us and confuse us into believing that we need to defend the FBI, that we need to be with Donald Trump. No, that's not what this is all about. We need to talk about the FBI on a more sophisticated basis. And the only way we do that is by understanding what the FBI is. The reason why we're in this moment is because Donald Trump helped create a political crisis. And Donald Trump is a very convenient scapegoat now for the whole political establishment to use to distract us from very important things. And the reason why Donald Trump is so useful and that MAGA is so useful is not because of their potentially revolutionary potential. It's because these forces are not politically coherent, and that where they are coherent, they are reactionary. That is true. This is not about whether the working class is all reactionary, whether these workers that are in the Trump camp are somehow deplorables, quote unquote. But if you look at the GOP's political sort of orientation at this moment, where they are the most coherent, where they are the most clear, they are reactionary. They are pro the most extreme forms of neoliberalism, pro-war with China and damn where everywhere else, Iran. And I mean, it's not a progressive political agenda. Where they are less clear is where the flanking is happening. You have to understand politics is sophisticated. They're looking at the Democrats as being in a weak position. The Republicans were, not in the majority in Congress for a good section of this time. They were during Trump and now not so much under Biden. they're still able to use their political capital to ensure the Democrats look very weak, and the Democrats like to look weak, right? So there's this political game going on among the bourgeois ruling class duopoly parties. And uh, Donald Trump is a very convenient focus right now. Very convenient focus. This isn't that important. It shouldn't be the focus of anything right now, but it is, and it's a huge story. And so I want to get to what is really important about this story, and that is the history of the FBI. I want to show you. So I'm going to read from here on out, section B, starting at domestic intelligence, the history that War Against the Panthers, a study of repression in America. This is Huey P. Newton's dissertation. And I'm going to try to get to this through 15 minutes. Hopefully I can get through that history. It's not too long. But I'm not going to read the whole thing. It goes over a lot of history, what he did, what kind of documents he scoured, and then some more history, the Haymarket incidents and repression there, labor repression. But I'm going to read from here on out. And I'm just going to show you just kind of like the roots of the FBI. Because there's nothing progressive about the FBI. Just because they're going after Donald Trump, it's not a progressive thing. This is an internecine ruling class conflict. It's one that we can stake out an independent position for and leverage. We can leverage this. We can use our leverage. I mean, honestly, if the squad, if anybody had any, I mean, I'm not going to call them leftists. They're not. But if there was any leftist bone in their body, they would be leveraging this for their own political aims, these divides. But we don't have that right now. But that's a conversation we should be having. So in 1808, the Attorney General under President Theodore Roosevelt created the Bureau of Investigation within the Justice Department to fill the gap caused by congressional prohibition of using secret services for investigation and intelligence activities. Although there was no formal congressional authorization for the Bureau, once it was established, its appropriations were regularly approved by Congress. It wasn't until 1916 that an amendment to the appropriations statute came to serve as an indirect congressional authorization for Bureau investigations. During World War I, the Bureau, aided by the Volunteer American Protective League, began to operate as a secret political police force. Within the Justice Department, the Bureau investigated the activities of thousands of German immigrants, as well as thousands of Americans accused of draft resistance. The 1918 slacker raids in New York and New Jersey involved a mass roundup of 50,000 persons without warrants to discover draft evaders. The Espionage Act and Sedition Acts were invoked, resulting in 2,000 prosecutions. Julian Assange is being prosecuted under this for quote-unquote disloyal utterance activities aimed mainly at socialists and labor groups critical of the government and its policies. During 1917-1918, Bureau agents raided offices of the Socialist Party and the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, across the country in a concentrated effort to gather evidence for mass trial of 166 IWW leaders. In late 1919, strikes spread through America. In Europe, there were socialist and communist-led uprisings. Using these events as justification for increased funding for the Bureau, Attorney General Mitchell Palmer told Congress, quote, "The Bureau is confronted with a very large and important task in connection with social and economic unrest and radicalism. As the Bureau shifted its attention from critics of the war to the activities of political groups, a special division on radical activities was organized. Quote, instead of performing their statute mission of tracking down and apprehending criminals, federal directives were mounting a massive, unfocused intelligence gathering operation involving the whole field of left-wing dissent. Information collected by Bureau agents was given to the Justice Department's General Intelligence Division, GID, an office established by Palmer after a series of bombings in 1919. J. Edgar Hoover was appointed the head of the new division. One of the bombings referred to above took place on June 2nd, 1919, near the White House. 2 anarchists were taken into custody without formal charges. One was deported, and the other, Andrea Salcedo, was held incommunicado by the Bureau. A few days later, Salcedo fell to his death from the 14th floor of a building where he had been incarcerated. Bartolomeo Vanzetti, a comrade of Salcedo, began an investigation into the death of his friend. Vanzetti, a Boston shoemaker, quickly came under Bureau surveillance, and on June 4th, he and Niccolo Sacco, a fish peddler, organized a protest meeting in Brockton, Massachusetts. On June 5th, the 2 men were arrested on capital charges, of which they were later convicted. A nationwide legal struggle for their release was waged for 7 years without success, and in 1926, Sacco and Vanzetti were executed. So this is the roots of the FBI. It's not the FBI yet, but it's the roots, the GID, the General Intelligence Division, which compiled a massive index card containing 450,000 entries on individuals, groups, publications, and special circumstances, and also collected information on matters of international nature, as well as economic and industrial disturbances. Since the federal law enforceable in non-criminal cases was the deportation statute, the main target of the Bureau's drive was immigrants or aliens. And without congressional authorization, the Justice Department, through the GID and the Bureau of Investigation, jointly planned and organized a nationwide drive to deport foreign radicals from the U.S. Among the deportees were Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman. American citizens, however, were not left out, since prosecution might be possible under state or existing federal law or under legislation which may herein after be enacted. The drive to deport radicals culminated in the Palmer raids of 1919 and 1920. The first of these raids took place on November 7, 1919, when 450 people were arrested in 18 cities. On the night of January 2nd, 1920, Bureau agents, along with immigration officials, rounded up 10,000 persons in 33 cities. Following the Palmer raids, every major American police department created intelligence divisions. From 1919 until 1925, the LAPD arrested 504 union organizers and political activists on charge of criminal syndicalism. These arrests resulted in 124 convictions, most of which were obtained through the perjured testimony of police informants. The LAPD Red Squad became a model intelligence division whose tactics were used by other police agencies across the country. So, we're getting into, this is the lead up. FBI was formed in 1936, and here you have police departments taking up these activities. You have the GID, you have the Bureau of Investigation started by Roosevelt Theodore. You have Harding coming into office, and all sorts of new activities happening, more funding, the budget rising for these kind of intelligence activities. And, it was an anti-communist witch hunt during this time. Oftentimes we hear about the Red Scare of the 1950s, but Huey P. Newton is talking about the 1920s. And the Bureau's domestic political intelligence infrastructure was greatly curtailed from 24 to 36, and that was probably because of the Great Depression. Efforts to gather such information were contained by state, private, and military intelligence agencies. The Bureau retained massive files that accumulated during the period of 1916 to 1924 and readily transmitted data to other agencies so they could pursue. In 1936, the FBI became, by presidential direction, the primary civilian agency charged with domestic intelligence responsibilities. Events in Europe provided the rationale for resumption of domestic political investigations when President Roosevelt asked the FBI to gather intelligence on quote-unquote subversive political organizations. There was still no federal law authorizing the kind of probe Roosevelt wanted, but Hoover cited the obscure provision of the 1916 Appropriations Act to launch a new wave of FBI suppression of radicalism. So, the FBI was founded during FDR. That's the progressive. That's the socialist. That's the leftist that everyone talks about. Founded the FBI. It was all about getting rid of labor activists, socialists, communists. And then World War II, in 1938, with World War II underway, Congress created a special committee to investigate un-American activities and propaganda in the U.S. In 1941, the Alien Registration Act, known as the Smith Act, was passed, and this made it a crime to teach or advocate the duty, durability, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing the American government by violence. It has been described by one of the country's best-known authorities on the law of free speech, Professor Zachariah Chafee Jr., as, quote, the most drastic restriction on free speech ever enacted in the United States during peace, because the U.S. wasn't in World War II yet. And then the Voris Act of 1941 required registration of all subversive organizations having links in advocating the violent overthrow of the government. These sanctions inevitably were intended to include supporters and even latent sympathizers, facilitated by the use of wiretapping, which had been authorized by presidential directive in 1940. So this is all about suppression. That's what the FBI is all about. And deportation, arrest of so-called undesirable aliens increased. And a major target during repression of these post-war years continued to be the Communist Party. Between 1918 and 1956, U.S. Senate investigations of communism were conducted by 18 standing committees and one select committee, and House investigations by 16 standing committees. In 1951, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the conviction of Communist Party leaders under the Smith Act. That's what the FBI was doing. They were helping out this process, terrorizing radicals, terrorizing leftists, terrorizing communists. The crime of the century, in the words of director Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, was the espionage case of Julia and Ethel Rosenberg, who were tried and convicted without any convincing evidence of their guilt. They were accused of being Soviet spies. Worldwide demonstrations and appeals failed during this period of spy hysteria, and they were executed on June 19th, 1953. This is the history of the FBI. It's an agency of war. It is not our friend. It's an agency of war. On July 24th, 1950, a month after the outbreak of the Korean War, President Truman approved an order written by Attorney General J. Howard McGrath, which served as authority for FBI activities relating to espionage, sabotage, subversive activities, and related matters. In the 1950s, Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, as well as Richard M. Nixon of California, seized the opportunity to promote the Red Scare. And then it was McCarthyism. The FBI aided this, falsified information, held press conferences, and really did attack the Communist Party and anyone they deemed sympathetic of it. So, and then he gets into the repression of Black America and the FBI's counterintelligence program, persecution of organizations from Southern Christian Leadership Congress, CORE, right? These more liberal groups, we could say, less militant or more nonviolent groups. I don't want to say liberal because things that the SCLC did and CORE in certain periods were definitely to the left of anything liberals have ever done. SNCC, Deacons for Defense, right? Stokely Carmichael, people like this, Martin Luther King Jr. The FBI had a hand in targeting Martin Luther King for assassination. I mean, you know, and then the large history of the Black Panther Party, which is, I'm not going to go over this whole thing because he goes over the whole formation of the party. This is a great read. I'll put it in the chat right now, and then I'll put it in the I'm not going to get to the, everyone from Fred. Oh, oops, I closed it. Everyone from Fred Hampton to Bobby Hutton in Oakland, Fred Hampton, Chicago, John Huggins, right? Just so many Panthers were assassinated, imprisoned. Still have Mumia in there. This is the legacy of the FBI. And then, of course, the Patriot Act in all of the ways that they've aided this criminal war on terror. So that's what we should be talking about, right? That's what we should be talking about when it comes to the FBI. They are no friend of ours. Just that history, pre Black Panther Party, right? And then, of course, it really ramped up, right? The FBI saw the Black Panther Party as the biggest threat to the internal security of the United States of America. And this was a time, 1969, when the Black Panther Party had taken a direction to focus on survival programs, the free breakfast program, free medical programs, free food programs, free education programs, free sickle cell anemia clinics. We're talking about an organization that had also, it was still for self-defense, but it had shifted its focus, right, to how to serve the Black community. And that was seen as a bigger threat, to be honest. It was seen as a much bigger threat than even the Black Panther Party's, willingness to open carry in places where it was legal to defend themselves. And a big reason for the shift in focus, too, was because the Black Panther Party received incredible backlash for its self-defense activities, for monitoring police, for carrying arms. Oakland passed the Mulford Act. Ronald Reagan helped pass that in California. So, and that was to restrict the ability for the Black Panther Party to carry weapons. So I want to put this in the chat. I have to reopen it though, but maybe I'll have to get to it later because here it is. So I'm gonna put. Oh well, actually, I'm gonna have to Google it. Maybe Big Teal. All you have to do is look up War of Repression against the Panthers, Huey P. Newton, PhD, something like that. It comes up, and then if the moderators can find that, that'd be great. It's right in Google. Actually, that might be a lot of work. It's right. It's there. I'll do it. I'll do it for you guys. I'll do it. Stay tight. Stay. It's available online for free. It's a great read. I've read it once before, and so I actually found it. So here you go. Keep liking the video, everyone. I'm going to get to the Patreon question now. The Patreon question that I will be answering today. I'm going to find it first. I didn't have it pulled up, but apologies. I was kind of doing a lot of stuff before this to get ready. Okay. But that's the deal with the FBI. That's what we should be talking about. I'm sick of having these conversations all about partisanship and whether it's MAGA, whether we're with the Democrats, whether we're with MAGA. Why does it have to? It shouldn't be like that. That's not how leftists. We don't have to be stuck in that world, right? We can win people over. If people really want to pay more attention to the FBI, then we can help expose them to this information. We can educate them about the FBI's role terrorizing the Black Panther Party, terrorizing labor unions, terrorizing communists, terrorizing anyone who challenges the status quo in times where the status quo feels quite vulnerable, like World War II, the rise of socialism, the Great Depression, economic crises, right? The Red Scare was all about vulnerability, or when becoming a hegemon, feeling insecure about what will happen if the socialist bloc in socialists and world socialism is able to build support in times of peace. Even, I mean, the Smith Act was a peacetime law. The United States was not in world war, was not engaged in war at that time, but it passed it because it was all about getting rid of so-called subversive activities. That means communists, that means leftists. That's happening now. Look at what happened with the African People's Socialist Party. That happened today. That happened this month. Raided by the FBI, harassed by the FBI. This is not something that ended. It's just universalized now. This repression against that happened and continues to happen against Black Panther Party members, against leftists and radicals. It's just universalized, so it's harder to see. We see it more so, and it's more visible digitally. Maybe the case of Julian Assange, maybe cases like this where truth tellers are really persecuted, and all of us are persecuted by the way that corporations censor us. But things like the Patriot Act, things like National Defense Authorization Act provisions, military detainment indefinitely, right, for quote unquote suspect of being a terrorist. All of that is just universalizing the apparatus that terrorizes rebellion, resistance, social movements, communists, socialism. That's, this system is organized to do that. And it found a moment post-Soviet Union to move forward in that direction, universalizing it, normalizing it to where people will accept, because of mass widespread fear, will accept damn right anything that the United States' military apparatus does. And that's what we have to challenge. And we can do that by going over this history. Everything has a source. Everything has a root. We can go through this history. We have to study this. So study war of repression against War Against the Panther, a study of repression in America by Huey P. Newton. Study this history. It's very critically important. So the last thing I'm going to do here, while you're liking the video, sharing it, and I'm only 5 subscribers away. Oh, it looks like 4. Thank you to 31st Century Socialism, who subscribed on Patreon. I'm only 4 subscribers away now from my goal of 500 for the month. Thanks so much for helping me get quite close already. So you can do that. While I go over this question, it's actually, I'm going to read it out. This person has been a long time supporter. So Phil Nichols says, and let me just actually, let me pull up the post on the screen. It's going to be a little small to see, but I want to give recognition to Patreon subscribers and, let people know that this is something that I'm doing. So here it is. Maybe I can zoom in on it. Yeah, I can do that. Here it is. So anyway, this is the post. Just me announcing. This was 5 days ago. I think I'm gonna try to re-up it weekly or regularly so people know. People can message me. People can just post some comment on this, and that's what people did. So Phil Nichols, who's been supporting me for a while, said, "Call me naive. Capitalism gives 1% of our money while impoverishing the masses who passively go along. China's economy, socialism with Chinese elements or characteristics, limits their 1%, creates a broad-based equality and distribution of wealth and prosperity. If the American masses understood how this works, they might and would likely want to explore it, oppose their capitalist masters. Shouldn't China mount a greater international campaign to publicize their system and the Belt and Road opportunities to counter/override capitalist neoliberal propaganda? Naive?" So, I mean, this is a great point, right? It's correct. I 100% agree with the points made. I do think that, when the United States under Bill Clinton, I think it started, right? This like neoliberal rhetoric of a rising tide lifts all boats was a complete lie. A rising tide never lifted all boats in the United States, but in China it has, right? By allowing some to get rich, by opening up to market forces, China was able to gain the productive forces necessary to move on questions of extreme poverty, of overall economic development, and then focus on how do we then use that, what we've gained at our disposal, to create a more equality in society and to address class contradictions. And that's what's happened in China, right? A rising tide has lifted all boats. There are hundreds of millions, more than 1 billion people have benefited, right? More than that, from the gains of China's revolution and, of course, China's reform and opening up. And that includes 800 million people, 850 million people, and now 900 million, including, or more than 900 million people who have shaken off extreme poverty. And now they're moving toward common prosperity. The Belt and Road Initiative is helping other countries around the world address poverty and lack of development because of imperialism and colonialism. So those are all great things. So China, right? China should promote this better. Now, I want to say this. I think this is important. I think there's a lot of factors at play here. I think that when it comes to China's focus, attention, and also resources, I think it makes sense that why China isn't some kind like going on the offensive, right? Isn't going on the offensive with propaganda to kind of show up the United States, right? It's not trying to wage some kind of international campaign to make its system be some kind of vanguard of socialism. It actually, the Communist Party explicitly states its commitment to multipolarity and its commitment to non-interference. And I think there's many elements to this, why this is, right? I think for one, the lack of attention on maybe more sophisticated propaganda is, I think, in part due to resources, how resources are allocated. I don't think China puts all the resources at its disposal into international media. And I think some of that is because that would take a lot away from other things. And I think sometimes when we see China's growing economy, we see these incredible achievements, we think that China is kind of like out of the woods, right? It's out of problems. But in reality, a focus and attention on media takes a lot of money, a lot of capital. They do invest in international media, but it still is state owned and centralized, right? And that's because the message has to be centralized. And I think that's correct. I don't think they should privatize their media and allow and just anybody to say what they want. right? Because I think that would actually also do a disservice. Who knows who could get in there and start to create problems internationally for you. So I do agree with the framework of the media needs to have to show China's collective voice and to demonstrate the position of China's government, of China's people, right? In all of the various ways that those things are united, because people need to see that. But it would take a whole lot of capital, a whole lot of investment to try to outdo the propaganda of the US corporate media apparatus, which has the advantage of having profit as their motive. When profit is your motive, you can do any damn thing to make more money. And that's and the government will fully subsidize that. China's government will never subsidize such a thing. So I think that there is a question of resources. How do you smartly allocate resources? Because if China was to invest even more money, not to say that they shouldn't, who am I to say? I don't know. Maybe they should. But if they invest more and more, I can imagine where that would cause problems with other areas, because China still is a developing country. Its per capita GDP is still 5 times smaller than the United States. It still has infrastructure problems to deal with. It still has basic things to kind of address when it comes to people's livelihoods. It has a lot of difficult questions that make it hard. And then to also manage, right, these larger global questions, defend yourself from imperialism, move forward with things like the Belt and Road Initiative. The United States is in a particular position where, yeah, it's not investing in anything, it's not creating anything, it's not making anything, it's not growing. The ruling class, finance capital, monopoly capital, taking everything, the military industrial complex raking at huge profits. And so the corporate media is allowed to just go, do whatever you want, as long as you stay on the line, the government line, the political line of the elite. As long as the corporate media does that, golden. They can do whatever they want. They can lobby Congress for, for whatever, for access, for everything. They can influence politics, and they can continue to consolidate and eat each other to the point where only a few of them own everything. In China, it will never be like that. So China really, I don't think, will have those advantages in this world political situation when it comes to media. But I do think that one of the real consequences of this new Cold War is that it's reduced the capacity of China to be able to work together with Western countries, the United States, people in the United States and Western countries, to develop these resources, to be able to continue onward, figuring out how can we be in solidarity with each other. And so it's this interesting dichotomy where a new Cold War, wars of aggression, they kind of compel us and require more solidarity, but that's been ruptured. And so we can't get beyond, right, official to official relationships, and it creates limits. And I've seen already, through communications I've received from Chinese publications, from things that I've seen in terms of um what the Communist Party has said, what Xi Jinping has been saying, what the Chinese government is saying is that they desperately want people-to-people exchanges to begin again. But with the pandemic and the aggression and the sensitive political issues, it's hard. And I think that's where this is going to have to start, is that we're going to have to, um, understand that China can't do everything. China cannot be, and I'm sure that there are people who want China's message out there and want it to be more effective, want it to be more widespread. But again, this is a dialectical problem. This is about contradictions. And the dialectics of the situation say that even if China, China can't, maybe it could do more. I've heard Carl Zah with this criticism. I don't have such a harsh criticism towards Chinese media because I think they do the best that they can. And I think that there are big political, cultural, and economic factors that make it just a different experience that Americans and Westerners may not be able to understand as well. I've embraced it because I think it's really helpful information, and that even if it isn't something that's going to get a Gen Zer or someone who's online, who's on YouTube looking to stream, right? Watch streams. It might not toggle their interests. It might not get them super impassioned or inflamed. I do think they do the best that they can with what they have, and I expect it to not be the same. And so I do think that the work will fall on us. That no, Phil, you are not being naive. You're 100% correct when all of those things. But China doing more, I think, is a question that has some objective qualities that need to be investigated. Those qualities are: can China invest more without taking away from other areas? I tend to think not. Maybe I'm being naive now, but I do think not. And I also think that there's a question of discipline here, political discipline, Communist Party discipline. There is promotion of Belt and Road achievements, initiatives. There is that in the media. But to promote it, does that get in the way? I'm sure these are arguments that are had. Does it get in the way of the principle of non-interference? Is propagandizing to people out in the West, to people in the United States, saying, support us, look at us, this is really good for you, don't you want this? That can be seen as kind of like inciting opposition in other countries. And China's foreign policy has been very much opposed to that for so many decades, if not its entire history as New China. But especially in recent years, where that political interference against China by the United States and its partners has been just so elevated. So there's sensitivities here. There are political limitations in the broader environment, I think, that need to be looked at. And then I think what it comes down to is us. Us. What do we do to change the political situation here so that the way that Chinese media or any media abroad covers US issues or covers their own issues changes too? Because certainly China has to stay disciplined within the Communist Party structure, within the ruling party structure, has to keep things tight, has to stay vigilant around interference, has to consider these things. But we can play a role in weakening, right? Turning imperialist war into civil war, into class war. We can play a role in creating conditions where, one, people are more interested in things like China's Belt and Road Initiative, poverty alleviation, etc., and also give China the opportunity then to respond to the changing political conditions. So I think that is kind of how I see things in a very complex world situation. Certainly, if the world situation were different, I may have a different answer. But for now, I tend to look at this with kind of a cool head, that Chinese media does the best that it can, and I certainly get a lot out of it. And I know that it's different and that some people may find it less exciting than others, less effective than others. I see it as the effectiveness of it on maybe US and Western populations is impacted by a lot bigger things like censorship and like the ways in which the media is denigrated and condemned, right, and delegitimized here. The racist attack, the yellow peril attacks, the McCarthyist attacks. I think those things by far and away have more of an impact on how Chinese media is perceived than the content that Chinese media produces. That's just my opinion. So, so anyway, that is the answer to that question. So, thank you to Phil for submitting it. New subscribers can do the same. Okay. So, or people who already subscribe on Patreon can continue to submit questions, but I'm going to try to do this once per solo stream. With guests, it'll be harder. Speaking of guests, though, and I'm just going to exit out of this. Speaking of guests, tomorrow, I'm actually going to make this public right after. I'm going to make this public now. All right. So I'm going to make it public now. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to make this public now. Tomorrow, I am going to be talking to Jerry Gray, who is a Canadian. He's a cyclist. He lives in China, and he has been very active in the Chinese media. But he's just had, I don't know if you can follow him on Twitter. He has been talking a lot about Xinjiang, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. He is really knowledgeable about this issue, and you know, um, he's done a lot of good work. And so he's biked, and so he's biked around the world. He's biked in Xinjiang. He can give a perspective of what it's like to do that. And I think he's why I say he's Canadian. He's Australian. There's all sorts of misinformation out here, but he lives in China right now. So you should catch that. That's going to be 9 p.m. tomorrow, and I am going to make that actually. Um, uh, I'm going to make that live right now. I'm going to put that. I had it prepared just for this moment. So I'm going to make that public as of today, August 12th. It'll be there. I'm going to copy the link here for you and put it in the chat so you all can head over there. All right. So you can head over there, set the notification, and make sure that you're there for tomorrow's conversation. Because this is, a lot of people have been messaging me about this, and I think it's an important subject. So I definitely wanted to oblige. All right. For some reason, it's not pasting, copy and pasting. But I wanted to oblige because, I did work on Hong Kong, 2 streams about it. And now I'm doing a stream about Xinjiang, and I'm sure there'll be more. I'm trying to get Daniel Dumbrell on soon. But I have some exciting guests I'm talking to. I'm talking to John Pilger, trying to get him on the program. Yeah. And of course, we'll have Margaret back. I got to have Margaret back on. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up. All right. So I put the link in the chat. Be sure to go over to the YouTube page and save it, notify it, get, wait, keep it up, open, whatever helps you. Remember, tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern, August 11th. All right, guys, it's 10:06 p.m. I'm just there. And I think, this is a good stream, a little bit quieter than others. But yeah, Jerry Gray tomorrow. He is an Australian, lives in China, and he's biked through Xinjiang. He's been on other programs. He's been on Brian Berletic's program. He's been on CGTN. He's been on Carl Zod's program. He did a debate with the Coda Story folks. So he's really knowledgeable, and he's a very generous person with his time. So be sure to catch that. And then so John Pilger might be happening, I think, maybe the second to last week of August. I'm hoping to get him. We'll talk about the war on China. We'll talk about Australia's role. It should be fun, So, with that said, I think that we can close this up now. I mean, there was much more I wanted to talk to you all about, but I've got to keep these shorter. I'm doing them more frequently now. So be sure, to subscribe to the channel if you haven't, hit the notifications bell. And of course, like the video before you go. And subscribe on Patreon or Substack. Substack's a great place. The links are all in the description. You can support me and however you can. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate all of you for coming out tonight. And I will see you all again very soon, tomorrow evening. It'll be a fun conversation about Xinjiang. We'll pierce through that propaganda. We'll talk about its significance now. I'm sure he'll have a lot to say, given all that's happened, right? He's in China, given all that's happened with U.S.-China relations at this point. Take care, everyone. Thanks to all the moderators of the chat. It was a very lively chat. Thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. And I will see you again tomorrow. Peace out.